Welcome to the High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by the head coach of the Cleveland Monsters, Trent Vogelhuber. Trent was the first Columbus native to play Division I college hockey at Miami of Ohio, posting career totals of 51 points in 149 games. He was drafted by the Columbus Blue Jackets in 2007, 211th overall, and immediately embarked on his professional playing career, spanning 267 games in the American Hockey League with Springfield, Lake Erie, and San Antonio. Trent won the 2015-2016 Calder Cup with the Lake Erie Monsters. Trent started his coaching career as an assistant coach for the Cleveland Monsters, a position he held for 4 years until recently being named the head coach of the Cleveland Monsters in 2022. This is a fantastic conversation, really rewarding for me. I had the opportunity to work with Trent and train Trent towards the last 3 or 4 years of his career. Absolutely outstanding human being, hard worker, unbelievable communicator, definition of a pro, dotting I's and crossing T's. We speak in this conversation about his playing career, successful teams, what they have in common, coaching his mentors, his early mentors, coaching today's players. We also speak about game day preparation, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, his thoughts on sports performance, technology, and advice for young players, young coaches, and hockey parents. It's a fantastic conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Trent. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much, Ant, for having me.
I'm going to label you right off the bat, something you're probably not comfortable with because you're a really humble person, but I'm going to say trailblazer. First Columbus-born player to play major division college hockey at Miami of Ohio. First Columbus-born player, to my knowledge, drafted in the National Hockey League, Columbus Blue Jackets, round 7, and first Columbus-born player to coach professional hockey. What does being an Ohio native and a Columbus person mean to you? I know you've got a deep love for the city.
Yeah. Again, I don't know trailblazing. I think it was a little bit more right time, right place. As far as coming around as the Blue Jackets kind of came to town. And actually, I do have to correct you. I was technically born in Cleveland.
Oh,
but I spent the majority of my life in Columbus, and I consider, although I am still living in Cleveland, I do consider Columbus home. That's where my wife and I are both from.
The hockey DB said Dublin, Ohio.
It is. I am. That's my hometown. I was technically born in Cleveland, though. So I it's there's a lot of pride for me. And I think it was coming up as hockey was booming in Columbus with the birth of the Blue Jackets. Timing was right. And yeah, it's a point of pride for me for sure to be able to have done all those firsts that you mentioned. Looking back at the hockey in Columbus now and in Ohio, my God, has it come a long way. They're just printing out players to play D1 in professional hockey. And you look even just the guys that we know that we've been in the gym with, right? Like the Sherwoods, all those guys this the amount of guys that are in the NHL now, making an impact in the NHL. So it's only going to get better thanks to people like you and obviously the Blue Jackets being there. So pretty proud to be a small part of it.
It is pretty amazing. We moved as our family in the early 90s, and I believe minor hockey, there was 93 participants signed up to play. Now you've got thousands and thousands of AAA programs booming. And it is, like you said, the young players now coming out of Columbus, National Hockey League Division I. It's amazing to watch the game grow in Columbus and Ohio.
And I think, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
You say I'm humble. I think you are as well. You, your family, your dad, you guys all have had a huge impact on Columbus hockey as well. That's how people like me learned at first, is people like you and your dad and your family, other people that came in to play for the Chill, hockey people that stayed in Columbus, and you can kind of expedite that process of young players. So it's a group effort for sure, but I'm glad to see where it is today.
Playing career, 4 seasons, CCHA, Miami, 267 American Hockey League games in Springfield, San Antonio, and Lake Erie. You mentioned timing. If you could expand on that a little bit, what led you into coaching? How did you get your American Hockey League opportunity?
Yeah, I never, I mean, truthfully, never wanted to be a coach, never thought about being a coach. Hockey was my whole life, and I kind of thought there would be a point of pride to do something and excel in something else when I was done. And that's where my mind was. After my fourth ACL surgery, I battled those, right? That's why I only had 267 games. I probably could have had double that if I was healthy.
Sure.
I came back to Columbus and signed a PTO with the Blue Jackets after I'd been in the organization for 4 years and left for 2 years to be in Colorado's, and got sent down to Cleveland after training camp. And the GM of Cleveland at the time was Bill Zito. He was showing me respect just from what I'd done for the organization before and trying to bring me back into the fold as a leader in the American League. And we had 7 or 8 good American League veterans. And if you don't know, in the American League, there's a veteran rule. You can only have so many that played above 260, and even so many more that have played above 320. So he just said to me, you can stay here on your PTO. I don't know how many games you'll get if we stay healthy, but just something to think about. I think you make a great coach. We have an assistant coach opening position. And it took me by surprise. I was like, okay, thanks. But no, I don't think that's something I want. It's not only something that I not thought of, it's something I kind of actively thought I didn't want to do, but took a couple weeks there and thought about it with, my wife, and just decided it's an opportunity that I can always get away from in a year or two if it turns out it's not for me. But it's really difficult to go and then get back, especially in a town like Cleveland. It's only 2 hours from our home. We had a new son at the time, so decided that it would be worthwhile to give that a shot. So I'm very thankful to Billy Zito for seeing something in me that I definitely didn't see in myself, and kind of offering me that out of the blue. So took it from there, loved it. We had players like one of my assistant coaches, Mark Letestu, on the team, taught him everything he knows, right? My first year coaching. We had some success. We made the playoffs, and hockey's all I've known. And you fall in love with, even though you're not on the ice, you're still a part of a team that's attempting to do something bigger than any individual, and that's win. And that's why I still love to be around the locker room and be here.
Off the cuff question, Vogues, just curious, when you finish playing the game and now you have the lens of a coach, I was able and fortunate enough to hang out in back rooms with my brother breaking down video for their coaching staffs. And oh my gosh, the game to me, from a player to a coach, is so different. The intricacies, breaking down the technical packages. I almost feel like as a coach, you see the game in a different view, almost like this PhD vision. Did you feel that at all, or was it kind of a smooth transition? You didn't have that demarcation between player and coach in terms of breaking down video, et cetera?
Yeah, it's an adjustment for sure. I think my style of play translated over a little bit better to coaching.
Okay.
I wasn't a super skilled player. I was face-offs, defensive, penalty kill, systematic, had to be systematically lights out to be impactful, right? That was my role as a professional. So I knew that early on. In order to play, I had to be that way. So I was dialed in from a systematic standpoint, defensive all over the ice, because, I couldn't make up for mistakes with some just flashy skill that you can't teach, right? I didn't have high end skill as far as NHL players do, especially these days, right? So I think it transferred over a little bit easier for me because that was my bread and butter. I was locked in. I knew the systems like the coaches did because I wasn't going to be making mistakes out there as far as structure wise and reads away from the puck. So I think that helped me make that switch.
You're a young coach now. This is your second year in the American Hockey League, but you've played for some really, really fine coaches. And I don't want to go back. I mean, Brad Larson, Jared Bednar, and I know you can go back to your university days, Blasey. Who do you consider your mentors in this field that you played for, or maybe you didn't play for them? And then what are the qualities that you admired in those coaches that you kind of want to bring out yourself? They always say absorb, modify, apply. No one's going to be a cookie cutter, but what are those qualities that you admired in them that you kind of emulate as a coach?
Yeah, you can go back even a step further. In junior, before I got to Miami, I played for the St. Louis Bandits for John Cooper.
Was he your coach back?
Yeah, he was my coach in St. Louis. Yeah, so he was a coach that the way he talked and communicated was just different from a traditional coach. It was very methodical and very rarely, raise your voice, get in your face kind of coach. You explain things in a very reasonable, logical way as to why you need to be better or why things are happening, which just made sense to me. So I
Sure.
always, having played for Coop there when I was 18 years old, I thought it's no secret as to why he's had success. He can relate to people, and his communication skills are through the roof. So that was impactful for me, and I try to imply that as best as possible. I think I've got a little bit more fire in me maybe sometimes, and I do have some of that old school coach where I get into it pretty good too. But like you said, you take things you like from different coaches, but you got to be
Sure.
yourself at the end of the day. So yeah, going from Cooper to Rico Blasi, and then in pro I had Brad Larson, and my assistants were Jared Bednar and Nolan Pratt. So those guys, and then Larson moved up to Columbus, and then I had Bedsy as the head coach and was with Prater again. And I thought Lars was really good. Again, so detailed, and he redefined hard for me, which I thought was really good. And I think it's something as a coach now, you can push players, young players coming into pro hockey, think they know hard. There's another level that you have to get to in order to do it. Not 42 games for college if you're lucky, right? If you get to the Final Four, but 82 or 92, hopefully 100 if you're having success in that league. So that was something he pushed, and it was, you have to be focused and ready every day for practice, or you're going to get run over. So it was just something there that I taught me as a player, and now as a coach. Like, you can push the envelope sometimes, I think, just from a mental standpoint, because players have what they think their ceiling is as far as their work output and what they can do. And I know we'll talk a little bit later. You got to balance that, of course, with the technology we have now and making sure they're fresh, right? But that was a learning lesson for me. And then I go up to Bedsy and Prater. They're very similar in the sense that you're a coach, but you're a person first. So if I had a bad game and I was poor, I never felt with those coaches that they looked at me differently or liked me less. They're going to coach you, and they're going to help you, and they can be hard on you. And if you're not getting the job done, they'll let you know. But I never had to walk by them with my eyes down, like kind of an old school coach year back, it was, you can still have that hard conversation. You walk out of the room, hey, how you doing? How's your family? What's for dinner? You know what I mean? Like, you can still treat people like humans, which I really try to apply that. I think that's the best way to do it, because you can coach someone, but you never forget they're human beings first. And so you have to kind of nurture that aspect, I think, way before you can just be a coach that's demanding and hard on them.
Absolutely. You were really successful as a player. You were literally minutes away from winning a national championship in college. Won a Calder Cup. I asked John Stevens this. He gave me a really unique answer. I asked him, what's the mark of a great team, Stanley Cup team? And I'll give you his answer. I don't want to bias it. He said, Anth, you got to have a really good spine. You got to have 4 solid centermen. He said, you have to have a deep back end. Again, some of that would be, look, I look at Vegas's team last year. And then he said, that, which I thought was really interesting, you have to have players feel comfortable stepping out of their roles. I'll give you an example. Jack Eichel played a 200-foot game last year. He completely changed. I mean, he's an amazingly skilled player, but he's blocking shots. He's, again, you won a Calder Cup, almost won a national championship. What did you think from your career now as a coach? Same qualities you think John Stevens would state as having a great team, a championship team, or are there any that different that you'd add in?
Well, no, he's obviously right with those. I mean, if you're talking positionally, if I was building a team, it's for sure centerman and defensemen to build around that. Absolutely. I think that's the best way to build a team for the long haul that can win you a 7-game playoff series. And it goes hand in hand with what he said. It's just saying it a little different, I guess, stepping outside of their role. For me, the best teams I've been on, the teams that win, players will do anything for the other players. And I think that goes hand in hand. You're talking about Jack Eichel stepping out of what his role kind of had been stereotyped, offensive, maybe on the offensive side of pucks and battles. But he's doing those other things because he doesn't want to let his teammates down. He cares about those guys, and you'll do anything. So I don't care what style player you are, you have to invest in the guy next to you. And it goes way beyond just on the ice. Like, again, the teams I've been on that are the best, at any given night, 8 guys are at dinner together at my house or apartment. It's you really form those bonds and care about each other off the ice. You have to. I'm a huge believer in all the team bonding, and we try to nurture that culture here. I want players together all the time. You're a family. Like, these are your brothers. No one is going to get, we're in the American League, right? Everyone wants to play in the NHL. No one's going to get there without the guys next to you. So you have to invest in them if you expect them to invest and help you. And then you build those relationships off the ice. And next thing you know, you're in a game 7 in the playoffs. And that little extra block that Jack Eichel gives in a big moment, or selling out on the defensive side on a track, or whatever it may be, comes because you truly care about that player next to you. You want him to have success, and you'll do anything to help them win as much as you want to win yourself. So it's kind of a generic, I guess, answer. There's nothing specifically on the ice. It's just that you have to have players, and you have to encourage players you got to invest in them, man. Invest in the guy next to you. And only from a selfish perspective, that does help you, right? But that's not how we sell it. That's the only way to have success. And everybody wants winners. That's the only thing that matters in this business, right? So yeah, invest in each other, form relationships. Those guys that were on winning teams with me are some of my best friends in college and pro. I still talk to them all the time.
I think I know how you're going to answer this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Is culture top down or bottom up? The best teams and the way you coach right now, do you feel culture is driven by the coach, or is it driven by the players?
It's definitely nurtured by the coach. I think your energy and what you bring to your personality you bring to the rink sets the tone. But that's all it does. That's all the coach does, is set the tone. It's the players that take it to the next level and turn it into something sustainable that can turn into a winner, especially the leaders. There's nothing more important in pro hockey, sports, I would imagine, business, than the people that are in the trenches leading. And that's our players, right? The leadership guys. You got players, your best players, especially, doing it the right way. You don't have any other choice but to fall in line. So for me, the culture that I try to build, try to set the tone for, is we're here for work and business, but we're going to have fun doing it. You're not going to be good at anything if you don't love it. You have to be passionate about it. You have to be energetic about it. So that starts with us. If I'm here hanging my head because we've lost the last game, that's a cloud over the practice. And sure, there's sometimes you got to send messages and carry a different tone based on where you are in the season. But we're here to work. We're here to get better together. But it should be fun. Like, we should be enjoying it. We should be laughing in the locker room after our work's done, but pushing each other on the ice competitively. That's how I am as a coach. But I can't control that all the time. I'm in the locker room 5 to 7% of the time. So those players, you lean on them to build and sustain that. So I guess, to answer your question, it's from the bottom up. Ultimately, it's those players in there that have to buy into the way you want to do it and sell it.
Slight pivot here, Trent. The game. I look back at, so I was done playing in the early 2000s. The game has changed a ton in my days. Back in the time, it was drafted on size, more clutching and grabbing. The style had changed. Obviously, you more recently played your last game before, I want to say 2018 was your last, 2017. Mm-hmm. So, there's not as much of a gap there, but in terms and measures of what players have access to, i.e. technology, iPads on the bench, social media, everything else, how has the game changed? Do you coach a millennial athlete any different, or is it all the same? Is it care? Is it love? Is it building trust, but also being able to relay a message when needed?
Yeah, well, kids are definitely changing, I think, but it's never going to change for me that you're, again, going to any business team, whatever it is, it's people to people, man. Like, you've got to be make those personal relationships, connections. And that's talking, like I said, about things that are different than just hockey and systems and how they can be better and what they need to work on. You're building relationships first and foremost, and that hasn't changed, for me from when I was a player to as a coach now. I think just you have to be more conscious with players now. Something that I try to do more of is so I'll do a team video and we show some teaching, you reinforce positively. And then when you
Sure.
pull guys in individually, you're teaching and you're, correcting. But the players now really, really want and feed off of positive reinforcement. Now,
Sure.
every player wants positive, right? You're doing this
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
you're doing that well. That's not always the case, but you have to balance that out. I don't want the march to the coach's office to be known that you're just getting corrected and I'm going to critique you, right? Like
Sure.
sometimes it can be a positive meeting and it can be nothing more than, hey, look at these 8 clips. This is you doing it well. This is why you're having success. Or if you're not having success and you keep doing this, you will over the long haul. Some of those going out of your way to, positively reinforce behavior
Yep.
on and off the ice, I think is something that is more prevalent now with young players. For
Sure.
me, when I played, again, it was only 2018. It wasn't that long ago. I didn't want to be talked to by the coach because I knew if you're getting talked to by the coach, it's something that you need to do better.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was trained. That's how I was as a player. If
Sure.
I went the whole year without one-on-one meeting with the coach, that means I'm doing it right. Right. So I think that's a little bit different where even if players are doing it right, they don't want to be left alone. They want you to bring them in and show them what they're doing right, just as much, if not more, than what they can improve on.
I would imagine, I know coaching, like you said, is building that environment and communication. It's got to be foundational, but you have a really unique job in the fact that when you're in the American League, and I know what happens in the National League as well, but most of the time, in this case, you're getting called up or called down. But in the American League, when a player is sent down from the National Hockey League or when a player is called up, there's a ripple effect, right? If a player, for example, is sent down, how do you deal with that player? Or maybe it's not. Is it white gloves? Is it talking to them in a meeting? And then conversely, the players that in the National Hockey League that are sent down, obviously there's a ripple effect in the lineup most of the time, right? Perhaps, you're a top 6 forward and now, you're on the bottom end of that. I remember Craig McTavish a long time ago, I spoke to him in one of the podcasts. He said, whenever I had to deliver a message that, wasn't a great message, meaning a lineup change, or I always wanted to meet with that person face to face. I always wanted to be able to answer questions for that person. How do you deal with that in your current role? And I'd imagine it's not an easy job, Trent. Or is it?
No, it's definitely not. Like you said, it's constant touching with different players that could be affected by things like that. So
Sure.
you get a player set down. First thing I do is I bring him in, talk to him, what was said to you. And we have communication with Columbus, right? So a lot of times I
Sure.
know ahead of time. I just want to make sure the messaging is clear and consistent. So you bring him in, how you doing, first of all, and I want you to be honest so players can vent their frustration. I don't think I should have been sent down. My confidence is whatever it is, right? We talk about
Right.
that, talk about what was said to you in the meeting. So you try to build a little bit of context as to how they're feeling, and then
Yep.
you can go from there, right? So with that individual player, right? You meet them, you talk to them, hey, this is what we're going to do. You're going to get opportunity here, blah, 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 blah. Let's work on this. Stay in touch with me. And then, yes, you're right, because somebody's coming in now, they're the top left winger, and
Yeah.
the guy who's in that role is bumped down to the second or third line. So you talk to that guy and you just, hey, look, it is what it is right now. Nothing needs to change. You're still doing good things. So it's just that players want to know why. Players want that face-to-face time. And if you can get out and do that, the boots on the ground face-to-face as much as possible, even if it's a 30-second, and players will be like, I'm all good. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know, and it's something as easy as that. But I try to stay on top of that for sure, because conversely, somebody gets called up. There's a handful of players that are wondering why it's not them. It might be a little pouty and it's hard for them because they're,
Yep.
somebody got chosen over them. So you have to be very aware of that. A forward goes up, you talk to 2, 3, 4 other forwards that are hopeful to get called up right now and could be frustrated and maybe angry and you get their feelings as to why. And a lot of times they're not wrong, right? It is what it is. It's a business. Maybe they need a certain type of player, or they want to give a certain player an opportunity he hasn't had before. So it's just being face to face and hearing them, listening to them the most. It's like you said, it's I don't know, it's not easy, it's simple, right? You just have to be on it, and every day being able to talk to, I mean, over the course of a couple days, I'll have anywhere from 2 to 20 minute conversations with just about every player on the team. Like, you have to make sure we've got a board in our team, in our room, a connection board, where after you have those conversations, we put it on TV, check in, or TV, whatever, my initials. And just so you can look, oh man, it's been a week since I've really talked to this guy. And then you just go check in. So I think that can help a lot of those small little problems or gripes from turning into bigger ones that can affect your team.
Excellent. Pivot slightly, Trent. Walk us through. You talked about, when you played, you were one of those players that you really wanted to hone in on the systems, the technical packages, and that, you felt that was a strong suit, and it's carried over into your coaching. I know every level's different, but maybe the process isn't different. Could you walk us through at the American League specifically, and you don't need to get into the details, but what is game day prep? Is it a 5-on-5 pre-scout with the team? Does that happen the day before? What are your touch points? Are you briefly dotting I's and crossing teams in terms of special teams? Are you going over video? And I know it's a kind of a lengthy question. In that, though, I mean, how much time total are you spending with the team before they hit the ice?
Yeah, so the American League, traditionally, you've got longer practice weeks than the
Okay.
NHL, where they're going every other day or 3 or 4 times a week, right? We might play Friday, Saturday. You might not play till the following Friday, or Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. So you do have more time in practice, and we try to take advantage of those with teaching just about us. It's about us, right? And we're trying to develop good habits, get everybody on the same page systematically, teaching anything from game management all the way into systematic play in video in front of the group. We do that before practice a lot of days. So that's kind of how we run that. And then when you get to the game day, you should, if the schedule allows it, just have to, like you said, dot the I's and cross the T's. We'll do a power play meeting in the morning before our pregame skate. And then any kind of individual clips you might need to show, sure, you can pull guys in there if you haven't done that during the week. Pregame skate, guys go, they come back. We'll do a penalty kill meeting that's, specific towards our opponent and with their structure and what they're going to be looking for with their power play, who's dangerous. So you're narrowing in a little bit more on your opponent in those meetings of the game, where during
Sure.
the practice, if we're showing PK video, it's about us and our basic structure and how we, move and make reads. And then I do a 5-on-5 meeting, and depending again on our schedule, it can be more so about us. Say it's off a back-to-back, or we haven't had a practice, it can be more about us. Or sometimes if we feel like we've covered that during the week, I could show 5-6 clips on them and their tendencies. And now it doesn't change the way we play. It's just areas and details of our game that we need to emphasize, right? This team's D really jump in the rush. So let's be structured in our forecheck finish, make sure we're above them. Our track and reload with our D gap is going to be crucial. Now that's something we emphasize all the time, but
Sure.
you really have to sharpen that area against this certain opponent, right? Or they use F3 in the offensive zone. We always want our F4 and our F5 to be down underneath the rail, underneath the dot line, we call it, to protect that area. But we really have to be disciplined in that area tonight, knowing that they try to look for that guy for offense. Just little details like that is about us, but it also takes the opponent into play a little bit. And sure, you can get into some specific face-off plays that they might run, and so you can have that covered as well. But that's usually the way we go about it. If we're in a back-to-back, or you're playing, sometimes in this league, you play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's usually more about us and making sure we're sharp, because that's the most important, right? We want to make sure we're sharp. You don't want to change too many things or talk about your opponent too much, but you sprinkle those in and emphasize different details of the game, I guess, based on what your opponent's trying to do.
From a standpoint of structure, Trent, do you ever change structure based on opponent? Meaning, hey, Anthony, we run a traditional forecheck, or hey, Anth, this is how we work in the neutral zone, regardless of opponent? Or does that change based on opponent?
The structure doesn't change, no. And for us in the
Okay.
American League, we mirror the Columbus structure
Okay.
so that players who get called up don't have to think about that. That's
That's
ultimately what our league is here for, right? We want to get players ready to play in the NHL. We want them to, learn how to win and be in a winning environment, of course. But on a player who gets called up and is playing for the Blue Jackets the next day, they got enough to worry about. They don't need to learn a new neutral zone forecheck and a
yeah, yeah.
new going from zone to man on man. That makes it way more difficult, especially on young players. So we don't change our structure based on anybody. Again, you might change a face-off loss in the ozone, jumping two, jumping one. Some of those simple tinks are easy,
Sure.
tweaks rather. And then the power play penalty kill, you might have to adjust a little bit more just based on what they're doing. But like I said, it's just emphasizing different details that we already teach and the way we already want to play based on some opponents, their strengths and weaknesses. You really want to hone in on certain areas just based, like I said, based on sometimes the way they do things. But it's always about us. We're not going to make any sweeping changes based on who you're playing.
Outstanding. All right. Slight pivot here. Passion point for me, but I'm curious to hear your comments. One off the cuff, but a huge compliment. We had the opportunity at our facility to work with you for several years, strength and conditioning, and were you ever honed in? You were really driven. You worked extremely hard, and you took the off season very, very seriously. Do you feel that strength and conditioning element is really important in today's game? Not just in terms of resiliency, but just being able. Everyone's working on it. It seems now, but do you feel that's a really important component for young players coming up in order to reach their potentials on the ice?
Oh, I mean, 100%, 100%. When you're around the best of the best pro hockey players, the on ice that you see on TV and in games is the tip of the iceberg. The preparation away from before and after is just immense. The amount of hours spent in the gym, especially guys who get older, right? You need to have a good base for getting your body ready. So you're building that over the course of your career, but it's hours in the gym. If it's not lifting, say in season as much, guys are still lifting in season all the time because you have to maintain
Sure.
strength in order to give your body the chance to compete the way that you're expected to. But it is maintaining, preventing injury. There's 2 hour long routines guys have as far as different rolling, different exercises just to get on the ice for a practice or a morning skate. You really see the pros. When we say teaching young kids how to be pros, we get kids that come from junior and college that don't have as strong of a base in that way, right? They don't have a
Sure.
pre-practice routine. You sit on the couch and you sip a coffee and then you get out there and the first drill is your warm up. That's not how you do it.
Yep.
You can't be messing up the drills because you're not sharp early on. And you see conversely pros who are pros, guys who are in the NHL and guys even here that are real pros. They're in the gym all the time, here early, taking care of their body. And then in the summer, pushing yourself to make sure that your body is able to compete. And I think that's it's important for young players too, because some of these guys, man, the workouts and routines you do even before a game, player in junior might think that's an off-season workout, right? Like it's just there's so much preparation and pushing the envelope as far as what you do to prepare. It's incredible. It really is. It's a full-time job. And eventually, once you become a really good pro, you become obsessed with that process. Like I remember being just obsessed with making sure my body was right and feeling good. And it's on days you don't feel good, you're pushing. Those are the most important ones. It's not okay to on a Tuesday when you got the sniffles, it's not for me today. In June, it doesn't matter. Like that's a step skipped, and that's a part of a link in the process that isn't there if you're missing those days, and you become obsessed with that, knowing that that's the only way that you're going to feel fully prepared and confident.
You have an outstanding strength and conditioning coach and performance coach in Cleveland, Benny Eves. Super smart human being. From your experience, Trent, And I know things have changed even now in the American League and NHL, and strength coaches now, director of sports performance. There's more technology. All that aside, what do you feel are, one, two, or three of the most important qualities that you look for when you're working with a performance coach or a strength coach?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to understand that there's not necessarily a right way or a wrong way to do it. And I think it can be easy because strength coaches are so researched and it's so ever changing, right?
Yep.
That you can think somebody who does it another way is a dinosaur just because they do it that way. And so
Sure.
I think it's important for a strength coach to work with the player. Some people have routines that are different maybe than a strength coach might suggest or recommend. So with younger players, right, you're still building that base. So maybe you can be a
Sure.
little bit more impactful in that way. But our strength coach, like you said, Benny, is outstanding at it. He's obviously as knowledgeable as he can be, but there's a lot of wiggle room there, knowing that players have their routines and certain things they like to do and areas they want to hit that you can work together with them, right? And there's no right or wrong way. We can get there together. And I think that's the most important thing for me, not thinking that you know everything and that somebody else, your prior coach, was a dumbass for the way they did it. It's just different. That's not right or wrong.
One of the many lessons I've learned doing 20 years doing this is I think coaching's a lot like parenting. At a young age, a directive approach can be warranted, but at a later age, it's got to be a cooperative approach. And I think the best programs are the ones that the athlete believes in. And if you can have a cooperative approach and you can meet that person in the middle, or, as long as it's not dangerous and there's nothing and you can give them what they want, I think it's a win-win. And I think, quite frankly, I think if you can't, be that kind of chameleon, then you're probably not going to last long at that position.
Mm-hmm.
The guys probably will grow to not want to be in the weight room.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's a huge, and again, if a player's doing something where you would think, oh, I don't think that's going to be healthy long term
Sure.
for the hips, for instance, right?
Yep.
You can say, hey, explain why, right? Oh, that's
Yep.
stupid. Don't do that. And that's
Sure.
automatic resistance. And players, that's worked for me before. What the hell do you know, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
hey, you're interested. I've learned some things here that can help, and there's
Yep.
other exercises that might even be more beneficial. Okay, why? They want to know why. They
Sure.
want to know why. They don't want to just be told what to do, especially again, going back to players this age. They want to know why. So you can, I think there's an area there to be impactful if it's approached the right way.
I don't know how it is in the American League. I know in the National Hockey League, this is happening more and more. My colleague and my friend Mike Boyle is a little bit outspoken on this. He calls it the nerdification of strength and conditioning. And, everyone now, as a strength and conditioning coach, it's all about technology and metrics and, coding. And we're moving away from the skills of actually coaching and people skills. Where does technology fit in at the American League level? Do you rely on that at all? Or is it much more heuristic gut feel based on the communication that you have with your sports performance team?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, to be honest, the American League has more budgetary constraints than the
Sure.
NHL, right?
Sure.
That's just the fact. Now we have heart rates and we've got the force plates and all those things that we use. And our players wear heart rates for practices, and we get the average, we get the work output number.
Yep.
You guys are way smarter than me. I just know what the number is. I don't know how it gets there. But we build our practices based on what we think our team needs.
Sure.
And we incorporate those to help us fine tune. If you're just building strictly on technology, I think, like you said, you lose the feel and the personable approach and the coaching aspect. So sometimes we'll get the practice results after with the number of workload. Okay, that was tough. And then you can, especially as the season goes along, incorporate that, take that into your decision-making, practice building, the amount of days you give off, for sure. Now, I think you have to be careful too, because like I said, going back to what I learned with Brad Larson, is you can redefine hard as well. So if I just, oh, yesterday's was a tough one, today we should just lay off just because, where I feel like my team needs to be pushed. Sometimes that take the numbers that you and the feedback you're getting from the technology is going to play second fiddle, because that's not the most important. And it's more important for our team right now to learn that you got to push some days when you don't feel like pushing, even if it's not, from the scientific standpoint, the most beneficial thing for their body. Over the long haul, we absolutely do take that into account and incorporate it for sure. It's a balance. I don't think you go one way or the other.
Sure. You know, one of the other comments that Mike Boyle had talked about regarding this nerdification of sport, and again, this is happening in the National Hockey League, is that you've got people that Mike would say, well, if I have an Australian accent or a British accent, then I'm hired as a sports director. And that's happened several times. And I'm not saying they're good or bad, but with a not so great understanding potentially of the game, right? They have certainly experience. And that's, I'm not saying one's wrong or right, by the way. This is Mike's opinion. But specifically with Ben Eves, I mean, there's a guy that's had an amazing hockey career. He also was very, very sharp on the ice. How do you use him, if at all, on the ice? Do you guys use him for end stage rehab in terms of rehabbing players? Is he also working in conjunction with skill work? In my opinion, the future, I think, in high performance, and it's happening now. I have colleagues in the National Hockey League that are doing a great job of this, is the ability to fuse the strength and conditioning with the ice, whether it's the skill work or end stage rehab work. And the reason I'm asking that is because Benny's kind of living and breathing example of that.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And to go back before we get into Benny specifically, like I've been around some strength coaches that aren't as knowledgeable in the game of hockey, which again is okay.
Yep.
But I think it's important exactly what you said, because we finished at 3-3, 3 games in 3 days. We're traveling home 6 hours on the bus. Players need to, if you've been through that, you understand maybe what a couple beers and pizzas on the bus can do, even though, you could probably have the quinoa bowls and grilled chicken and it will do better for you. But you got to understand, like, there's a mental reprieve too, to, hey, we put in the work. Let's reward these guys a little bit as well. Right. I've been around some strength coaches as well. Like, why are we having pizza? That's just, they should be having this grilled chicken, like that, and you're like, okay, like, you got to have that little feel for it. Right. I think Ben's as good as I've been around, the best I've been around at meshing those two, because he's played and he's knowledgeable in that area. So he builds every off ice workout around what's going to help these players on the ice. And within those workouts, they're individually tailored to each guy. He's got a plan for each player based on what they need. So you've got the kind of main framework workout, and each player has a tweak based on what they need that day, what their body type is, and what they need. And then he knows exactly that the workouts are built for what that player needs on the ice as well. And he goes on the ice with these guys and does skill work before or after practice, so they're exactly in line from what you're working on off the ice to what you're doing on the ice. Again, him and you are way smarter than me. I couldn't be that organized and draw up that kind of plan. But he's got it dialed in, and the players know and appreciate it, having someone who's understands the game, understands what they're going through, and has that kind of moldability as far as what they're building for each player, right? And they feel very much taken care of, because there's a lot of individual and specific thought that goes into how each player is being treated and how we're helping to prepare them.
Absolutely. I think it also builds buy-in too. You play the sport at a high level. And again, I'm not saying you have to. That's not what I mean. But I do think it helps solidify. All right, last pivot, Trent, because I want to respect your time. Advice. Obviously, we talked earlier in our conversation about the landscape now in Columbus, and more players are involved in the game. And as a consequence of which, we've got volunteer coaches and more coaches involved in the game. Advice for aspiring coaches.
I think just, bloom where you are planted right now. I don't, I'm coaching.
I like that.
I like that. I'm coaching now in the American Hockey League. And if you look at it, you could say, man, you're one step away from the NHL. I want to try and get an NHL job, which of course everybody here ultimately wants to get to the NHL, right?
Yep.
I have 0 5-year plan or expectation to try to get to the NHL. I'm trying to learn as much as I can, help these players along as much as I can with the group I have today. And I think whatever level you're coaching at, if you buy in to that group of players, that team that you have now, all it does is help you get to where you want to go. I'm not trying to skip a step, or I don't even think about the NHL. I'm here doing what I can to help these players here now. There's no ladder that I'm trying to climb. I think if you're looking at it that way, job jumping coach to coach to try to get to where you want to be, hey, to each their own, right? But for me, I just want to be fully invested where I am, what I'm doing right now. Ultimately, yes, I'd love to get to the NHL someday. That'd be great. But I don't put any thought into that. I don't sit at home and think about what I can do to get to the NHL. I sit at home and think how I can help my team and my players be better.
I'm stealing that. Bloom where you are planted. I love that.
Yeah.
Advice for hockey parents. This is a big one, right?
Yeah. Well, luckily, in my level, I don't have to deal with them. The parents aren't allowed to call me. So that's fortunate. I can imagine, especially at some of the lower levels, how difficult that can be from a coach's perspective. And sure, from a parent's perspective, you all want what's best for your kid. But I think too many times young players can look elsewhere if it's not working for them.
Yes.
And I think that probably starts with the parents, right? Where this coach doesn't like me, that, this situation's wrong. No coach that I've ever played for hasn't played the player that they feel deserves it the most or that can help the team win the most. So I think you have to really trust the people that are there, knowing all they want to do is help the team win and help the kids. And ultimately, the best players are going to play more, right? And if you're not playing, work harder and try to beat one of those guys, right? Try to take some ice time there. It's hopping from team to team or place to place isn't the way to do it. The other thing I'd say for parents is I go back to how we started this. The only way that you're going to be good at something is if you're passionate about it and if you love it, right? So if your son or daughter is playing hockey or any sport and they love it, absolutely. Let's give them anything we can to help them be successful in doing what they love. But it will never, ever work out if a parent wants it more than the player does or their son or daughter, right? So I think that was, I was lucky with my parents. I was obsessed, still am, with the game of hockey from when I was 4 years old on. It's all I wanted to do. My dad never watched a hockey game outside of Miracle on Ice. If it was his choice, I would have probably played basketball, right? He played D3 basketball. They put a basketball in my crib, right? But I loved hockey. And so he ran with it and supported it that way because I loved it. My mom and dad did. So I think understanding that the kid needs to love it to really have a future in anything that's outside of sport as well, right? You really have to be passionate about something if you're going to be good at it. And then also instilling in them that to look inwards first if it's not going your way, and not encouraging them to get on the woe is me bandwagon. The coach doesn't like me. The coach doesn't not like you. I promise. It's you have to look inward and find a way to get on the ice more, to get on the court more, or to get in that coach's good graces, because he's just trying to coach the team as best as he or she can.
Advice for young players.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not a whole lot different from the advice for parents. I mean, whatever, if you love something and you have to love it, you follow that. It's if you're not having fun playing hockey, you're not going to be successful playing hockey. And if the joy of hockey is gone as you move up as a 16-year-old or as an 18-year-old because it's become more competitive and it's not what it was when you were 14, that's okay. But
Sure.
it's not there. It's not there anymore, right? So you have to follow what you love and what you're passionate about. That's the only way anybody is ever going to be successful at something, is if you love it. And I was obsessed with it. I still am. That's the only reason why I had a small level of success playing, because it's all I wanted to do. It's all I still want to do, is be around the game of hockey.
So you also love golf too, right? Because you're a scratch golfer with you and Pops.
I'm not scratch. I'm not I got 2 kids now. I'm not scratch anymore. The handicap. I do love golf though. Yeah, I do love golf. And I try to get out as much as I can, although the rounds are just keep going down and down each summer now.
Last question, Trent. You've got a young family now. I know you're only 35 years old, and the sky's the limit for you in terms of coaching and where you may be in the future. But I always ask this with our guests: legacy. How do you want to be remembered long after you leave the game?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I'd like to be remembered as somebody who cared about the people that I worked with and was a positive person to be around, and that, the teams that I coach were fun to be a part of. And yes, I want to help teach, and knowledge of the game and all those things are important too. But somebody that cares about the people that I'm with, and somebody that is fun to be around, that you can enjoy being around, whether I'm a head coach or assistant coach or whatever that looks like. I think that's the most important ultimately, is to, again, just to be a person before a coach or a trainer or a player or a strength coach or whatever that is. People want good people around, right? That's all. Yep. You got to be knowledgeable. You got to be skilled hockey players to be here. I don't want shitty guys or girls around. I want good people, because that's, so hopefully that's what I can be remembered for. It's pretty simple and generic, but that's it.
Our guest today has been Trent Vogelhuber. Trent, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Anthony, thanks so much for having me, and keep up the good work, man. Again, you guys are doing so much for strength coaches everywhere, but people, the young kids in Columbus and hockey players specifically. The impact you guys are having is way beyond probably what you guys recognize. Keep up the good work, and thank you so much for having me.